Have you ever just stopped and wondered, why do we have feelings? I mean, what's the point of this incredibly rich, colorful, and yeah, sometimes painful inner world that we all live in? It is one of the biggest questions out there. And in this explainer, we're going to dive into a really fascinating hypothesis that suggests our feelings aren't just some weird byproduct of our brains. Nope, they might be the very thing that gives our lives and our actions purpose.
And the research paper we're looking at today boils this whole thing down to one beautiful, simple question. If our actions didn't produce some kind of feeling or experience for us, why would we even bother? That single question is going to frame our entire journey here.
Okay, so to really understand the debate, we first have to get our heads around what makes consciousness so incredibly difficult to explain in the first place. This is what's famously known as the hard problem.
So here's the deal. We can map out the brain's wiring, we can track all the chemical signals, we can do that all day long. In a way, that's the easy problem. But the hard problem, a term coined by philosopher David Chalmers, asks why all that physical stuff should feel like anything at all. Why is there a subjective experience of tasting a banana or seeing the color red? Science honestly struggles to even find a place to start with a question like that.
Now, when you're facing a problem this massive, a common, if kind of unsettling idea has popped up. What if all this feeling, what if it's functionally useless?
To really get this idea, we need to understand a key distinction that philosopher Ned Block made. On one hand, you've got access consciousness. This is basically the brain's information processing, the stuff it does for thinking, talking, and acting. It's the functional part. But on the other hand, you have phenomenal consciousness. That's the raw feeling itself, the subjective quality of an experience. And the radical idea here is that maybe, just maybe, you could have all the function without any of the feeling.
This view has a name. It's called epiphenomenalism, and it basically suggests that our subjective feelings are just a side effect of all the activity in our brain, kind of like the heat coming off your laptop. The heat is there, sure, but it's not what's running the programs. It's a really counterintuitive idea, and it's the one we're here to challenge today.
Okay, let's make this personal for a second. Imagine someone offers you an enormous amount of money, a life-changing sum. The only catch? You become what philosophers call a zombie. You'd still walk, talk, and act exactly like you do now. But on the inside, nothing. No joy, no sadness, no experience of color or taste. You feel absolutely nothing. Would you take the deal? I mean, almost everyone has a gut reaction to this, and it's no way. And that reaction right there shows just how much we value our inner experience, suggesting it's anything but useless.
So, if our feelings aren't useless, then what are they for? This is the question that brings us right to the core hypothesis of this research.
The central claim is this: consciousness has a function precisely because the experience itself is valuable. It's not just some side effect, it's the main event. Feeling good or bad isn't random. It's a core mechanism that guides everything we do.
To really get this, we need to see the difference between two kinds of value. First, there's instrumental value. That's about getting something done. Think of an IV drip. It gives you nutrients so you survive. It's valuable for a purpose. But then there's intrinsic value. That's about the experience itself. The joy of eating a delicious meal has value for you, totally separate from the calories. The hypothesis is that consciousness is all about creating this intrinsic value.
So, if experience has value, how does that actually help the brain work? Well, the theory proposes that it acts as a kind of common currency that the brain can use to make all sorts of decisions across different systems.
Take decision-making. For a long time, scientists have talked about a reward paradox. How does your brain know what a reward even is? Well, this theory suggests the answer is experience. An object out there in the world, like money or food, only becomes a reward because of the subjective feeling it produces in you. Consciousness provides that crucial link between the outside world and what actually motivates you.
Or think about emotions and really extreme behaviors. From a purely logical, survival-first perspective, something like base jumping makes zero sense. It's incredibly dangerous. But the intrinsic value of that exhilarating feeling, that subjective experience of flight, can be so high that it literally overrides the basic evolutionary drive to just stay safe.
And get this, it even applies to something as simple as perception. Research is suggesting that we automatically assign a tiny little bit of value, they call it microvalence, to everything we see. Even a supposedly neutral object like a teapot isn't truly neutral to our brain. It gets tagged with a subtle positive or negative feeling. This means that seeing is never just about gathering data, it's always fundamentally about evaluating.
Okay, so let's put all the pieces together.
Once you start seeing experience as something that has intrinsic value, a whole set of really powerful functions just emerge from that.
First, it unlocks incredible behavioral flexibility. It lets us create and enjoy things like art or music or jokes, stuff with no obvious survival advantage, just because the experience itself feels valuable. Second, it gives us internal motivation. We don't just act because we're programmed to, we act for our own reasons, like for fun or just to see what it feels like. And finally, it unifies the mind. This idea of value becomes a common currency, letting you weigh completely different options, like going for a walk with friends versus reading a book, against each other in the same mental space.
And this brings us to the biggest payoff of all. If our phenomenal experience has a clear function, to assign intrinsic value, then the hard problem is no longer this unsolvable philosophical mystery. It becomes a scientific problem. We can now ask how the brain computes this value and how it guides our behavior. It becomes a problem about function, and that is exactly what science is good at investigating.
So we'll end on this thought. We can build an AI that can process information and even maximize a reward, but that reward has no value for the machine itself. If this theory is right, then a truly conscious AI wouldn't just be smarter. It would need the ability to have subjective experiences, to genuinely feel, because that feeling might be the only thing that could ever give its actions real purpose and motivation in the first place.